Welcome to the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I'm your host, Anna Gray. The best thing about being a nurse and entrepreneur over the last 25 years are the relationships I've developed and the people I've met. As a legal nurse consultant, I wanted you to hear from those amazing people in the legal and healthcare communities. I wanted you to hear who they are and to celebrate them with me. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered. Let's dive into the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I'm really excited. I know I say this in every episode. I'm really excited, but I am really excited to have my guest Terri on here. We've been trying to get together and have this conversation. So we're here. I really appreciate you being here, Terri, and I'm really looking forward to having this conversation and getting to know you a little bit better. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here with you, Anna.
Oh, great. Okay. So let's kind of go back in I love the term, the way back time machine, and go back in time. And actually first, will you share with us where you're coming from? Where in the States you're coming from?
I am actually located in Folsom, Louisiana, which is about an hour and 15 minutes north of New Orleans.
Okay.
And I have grown up here and lived here most of my life. I did spend 5 years in Los Angeles, so that was a little sojourn. I said I went to the other LA for a while.
That's right. the probably scary LA. I can only say that because I live here. Okay. How long ago was that when you were in LA?
I was in LA in 2015, so
okay.
From 2015 to 2020 about.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So in Louisiana, and did you start in Louisiana? So you've been there for, you said, most of your life, obviously. In the same area of Louisiana, or?
Actually, I grew up on what's considered the South Shore of Lake Pontchartrain.
Okay.
And had some guests in, some nurses that came in to join me last week who came in from California. We got to drive across the longest bridge over water in the world, which is over the Lake Pontchartrain Causeway. Mm-hmm. So, I've grown up here and have done much of my nursing here. Yeah. We have that in common. I started as a surgical tech. Mm-hmm. When I graduated from high school, I went through a local hospitals training program, and I did that for a while, and then went on to do nursing because I wanted to be able to do more and to be able to interact with the patients. So I worked at that facility. It's Ochsner Foundation in New Orleans, and I worked there for about 23 years or so. So I spent a big part of my career there. Kind of grew up, was mentored there. Most of my clinical focus was emergency department. That was my love. Mm-hmm. And so I spent time doing that. And then they allowed us, I was a unit manager at one point in my career, and they allowed us to work as house supervisor in a PRN capacity. Mm-hmm. So that was fun because I got to learn more about, everywhere, all the different units in the hospital.
Yeah, exactly. So when I love the fact that you were a surgical tech. When you were a surgical tech and you decided you wanted to do more, did you initially want to go into the ER then, or was it through schooling that you decided to go in that direction?
Actually, for the class, they rotated us through labor and delivery and the emergency department as part of our rotation. Mm-hmm. And when I went to the ER, I just really fell in love with it. Yeah. And so when I graduated from the program, there was an opportunity to stay in the ER. So that's what I did. Yeah. And I worked there, when I was going to school, and then went directly in as a staff nurse, after I finished my program.
Right, which is what we could do way back back in time.
Back in the day.
It's a little bit more difficult for people to get jobs. I mean, even though there's enough jobs out there, it is they really have to jump through hoops nowadays to get a job, their first job in nursing, which in the past it was like wherever you had connected the most, or maybe you had a really good experience, with your preceptors, and you made a good impression on them, and then when you graduated, you kind of were able to just step in. Nowadays, it's a little different. now it's very formal. It's very formal.
Yes.
That's interesting. I think that maybe the OR and the ER are probably similar and different. It seems to be a natural transition. I do know of nurses who have been in the OR that decided they were ready for something new, and they went straight to the ER too. So there's enough similarities in that, but it's definitely a fast-paced thinking, right?
Yes.
Fast-paced critical thinking. I've never worked in the ER, but we collaborate with them. And so I can imagine you have to think on your feet quite a bit, which is similar to the OR, but not quite as fast-paced, or really you're kind of dealing with what's in front of you, right? Here you are, what's in front of you. I got a little bit of a stint of that during COVID. We had shut down the OR. COVID tends to come up in this podcast all the time.
I can imagine.
What's this blip in time that we all kind of can relate to? But the OR had shut down, and we had to be distributed around the hospital. Well, I had worked in the OR my whole entire life, and I had been out of nursing school for many, many years. But we were sent on the floor to go be runners for things. And, we had access to the Pyxis, and I said, I don't want to be a runner. I don't want to sit there and do nothing. I'm used to, doing things. Mm-hmm. So they said, okay, well, we can put you out in the front of the ER, and we'll call you a greeter. So they couldn't call us a triage nurse because we had not been trained to triage, but we were greeters. So in the midst of COVID, there were a group of us that on our OR shift, we would be greeters. And we were assessing patients, essentially. We were being triage nurses, essentially. Yeah. And I get that feeling of why ER nurses want to be ER nurses, because there is this, that I don't know, rush is not necessarily the right word, but this rush of like thinking on your feet and getting the right answer, or reaching out to the right resources, or, taking what's in front of you and trying to put the puzzle piece together so that you can communicate down the line. Anyways, I got a little blip of that, and I had a new appreciation for the emergency room, for sure, because it had been a while since I even had stepped into the emergency room. But so I had a new appreciation for that, and then I could understand why the love. An ER nurse is an ER nurse is an ER nurse. You can understand that, the love of that. So just in that little tiny crazy moment.
Well, I also had a good bit of experience doing pre-hospital stuff. So that is similar work, but in a less controlled environment.
Right.
So I did wind up getting involved in that as well when I was doing emergency nursing, and that was another love.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, in your journey in the ER, did you go into any management? Did you take on any additional leadership roles?
Yes, I did. Actually, when I first got started, because I had been in the ER for years, you know how it is. And back in the day, as you said, things were more relaxed, So by the time I was out of orientation, I was in charge, and it was that was not a Yeah, that was not uncommon to happen.
Right.
But I went on and became a head nurse. We had head nurses at the time, head nurse within the department. And then I had a pretty cool opportunity. The auctioneer was responsible for the healthcare facility at the World's Fair. This was back in the 80s. And so we got to set up a 12-bay emergency department on the World's Fair site.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty exciting thing to do. And after that, I went back to the auctioneer ER and wound up unit director. And I worked as unit director for multiple years.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That seemed to be the natural route people took. I know I did the same thing. It was very much, very quickly out of being right out of nursing school, even though I had experience in the OR. It was like, okay, you want to take that charge nurse position? Sure. Young nurse, more money. Sure, of course. And we would take that, and then, you run the ladder. Nowadays, I've noticed, based on actually a lot of these conversations I've had, people don't necessarily take that route anymore. What I'm finding is that instead of people want to grow, nurses want to grow, but instead of taking that leadership management route, they are taking these, advanced practice nursing route, like out of school, right out of nursing school. Okay, I'm ready for the next thing. Okay, I'm ready for the next thing. And in the old days, we would be ready for the next thing, and that next thing was management. Yeah. And so I find it very interesting that need for more is still there. I'm literally having this observation while we're speaking, because I've had so many conversations recently about this. And I always ask the question about, whether you went into leadership or not, because I know that was my experience and a lot of our experiences who have been in this for over, 20 years or whatever. But most people nowadays don't necessarily take those management roles. They feel that moving forward is in a different capacity. But I don't necessarily think that back then that capacity was really there. I think if those options were there, then that's probably the route we would have taken too, Yes. Than being in charge. I want to know more. I want to educate myself more. I want to be more valuable. I don't necessarily want to be in charge, but I want more. And it's very interesting to think about how the changes in nursing have occurred. But it's all growth. And that's what I love about it, is that I think a lot of us that are in this profession, in the legal nurse profession too, it's like we have all grown. We embrace the growth. We continue to embrace the growth. And that's what makes us special. I don't know. We're just going to call ourselves special. But I think it's special because taking on this role is something totally out of our comfort zone, right?
Yes, ma'am.
It is leadership. It is education. I know we all kind of feel like we're probably all natural. I did an interview earlier this morning, and we talked a little bit about this education, and we all are kind of educators. Before we get into legal nursing, we become educators even more so. So we've all come from that same cloth of growing as a better nursing professional. And I don't know. I think I'm just making an observation. I'm sure you agree.
I do, actually. And I was pretty fortunate because I got to, after I had my first child, the schedule got really hard for the ER. And I had an opportunity to work in risk management in the hospital. So that was just a natural progression. And I told people all the time, whoever would listen to me, I was like, that was my favorite job ever. Wow. I worked with in-house counsel. And as you said, I did a lot of education. And yet we also looked at lawsuits, within the institution. And, but the exciting part of that was the ability to see those near misses or the problem issues, and then be able to put educational programs in place that, would hopefully short circuit that moving forward.
Sure. Yeah, no, what a gift to be able to be a part of that. And I don't think that looking back at it, I don't think that risk management was something that we even looked at as being useful or exciting or something until now. We go, gosh, maybe we should have taken a risk management role or, because it is exactly that. It is like your first step in being, interested in seeing what happened. I know for us as OR nurses, and I'm sure for other departments as well, is you take care of your patient now. You don't know what happens to them in the future. This is an opportunity, and risk management is an opportunity to see, what had occurred and taking that and being able to educate your nursing staff. I know that a lot of us, now that we're in this role, we've managed to take that role on, not officially as a risk management nurse, but as, someone in the department who has seen the other side, to come back and educate. And I will tell you how valuable, those eyes that look at you, that hear the stories, that say, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Yeah, what a gift that you were able to be a part of that. I would have loved to, looking back in hindsight, I would have loved to take it on a role like that in my management leadership growth.
Yeah, it was great. It was a great opportunity.
Yeah, I bet. Is that what led you into legal nursing, or how did you, tell me a little bit more about how you got into legal nursing? Tell me the story about that.
Well, when I was in Los Angeles, I went out to Los Angeles with my youngest daughter, and we were living together. The first job I got out there was with LA County, and I was doing health facilities evaluation and long-term care. So that was an interesting job, and I did that for about a year, when an opportunity came up that I kind of couldn't pass on, and it was with Paramount. And I actually worked on the lot for about a year. I did that for about a year as well. And then I was doing that job, and I was like, I just want something different. And I was like, I'm hearing a lot of people talk about legal nursing. I think I'm going to investigate this some more, because I certainly have background, that would easily lend itself to this. So it makes sense for me. So I went through the Vicky Milazzo course, and felt that was a good preparation for me at the time, and sent out some blind emails. And actually, I did snail mail. I did a snail mail, just like a sampler to see what would happen.
Right.
And I mailed 12 letters, and I got 4 attorney clients as a result of it.
Wow.
So it was crazy. And then the other thing that, I tell new LNCs that I meet all the time is, you never know where the opportunity will come from. Because while I was there, I started attending defense medical exams as an observer. And I worked for different people, and, finally found a person that I felt comfortable with, and we kind of meshed real well. And so I started doing exams predominantly for her. And when I decided to go, that it was time to come back to Louisiana, the last DME that I attended, there was an attorney present at the exam, which is not very common, but does happen occasionally. And when the exam was over with, and we had loaded the client up to go back to the nursing home that he was in, the attorney turned to me and he said, "Oh my gosh," he said, "this guy is not getting what he needs, is he?" And I said, "No, he's really not." And he said, "Can you help me with that?" And I said, "If I can do it telephonically, I'd be happy to help you with that."
Right.
So when I thought I was coming back to Louisiana and wasn't going to be working with my mentor anymore, I called her and said, "Hey, we've got a case management case. Do you want to keep working with me?" And she was like, "Yes." So, so it worked out really well because that was something that allowed me to make some connections and work within personal injury doing that. And then she called me, I guess it's been almost 3 years ago now, and said, "I'm thinking I'm going to be ready to retire soon. How would you feel about running my business?" And I said, "Well, how would we make that work?" And she said, "I don't know. What are your thoughts?" And so we started putting together, information about how we saw this working. And so I started managing her business. And now, as of October this year, she has retired now. So
what a great transition. I think that's so nice that she was able to hand off to someone that, she trusted and that you were able to take it on.
And it gave me an opportunity to establish with the attorneys because, with a list like this, it's not like you're buying a business, you're more buying a list, So, we worked out how we would make that work together, and it really served both of us very well.
Right.
So, and I was able to get to know the attorneys. They got to know me. And so it's kind of been pretty seamless as we, transitioned. So I'm been very lucky.
I love also how you shared your story in that I think, and I don't know if this was on the podcast that I just did. I think we talked about it, and I don't know if it was during our recording or not, but we were talking about the fact that everybody's story is different. You just never know what opportunities arise when, or, what that trajectory may look like. For you, you've got this amazing list, and you're incredibly busy with DMEs. Whereas, the next, and this you just started to do the DMEs out in LA, and then it just kind of transitioned to one thing and then another thing. And here you are because you said yes to something. And that's what I love about this profession, or this specialty, or whatever you want to call it, is that you just never, I've heard this story from many people. It's like they couldn't predict where they're at now in the beginning. It just happened to be, they just took a few steps here and a few steps there, and here they are. They're known for this, and it was because the right opportunity or the opportunity appeared because they were doing something. Like, if you were to ask someone that says, and they ask you, you said, you did snail mail. Not one person I've ever seen lately has recommended snail mail, right? But you did it, and people showed up. It's just proof that there is no one way. Not only is it that opportunities arise if you show up, right? It's also, there are more ways to skin a cat, right? There's more than one way to skin a cat. And you're proof of that in multiple ways. You were like, I'm just going to follow my gut. We're going to send mailers out. And it's not like you sent 100 out. You sent enough out that they were supposed to go out. And that's your story. My story was email marketing. Same kind of thing. People do not recommend email marketing. But even to this day, when I look at my list, I go, did they come from LinkedIn? Did they come from email marketing? No, my attorneys that continue to come back came from my emails, which is something that people don't recommend. You just never know. You just never know unless you show up and do it. So I love that you shared that, because I think it gives people permission, right? If they're launching their business. I know a lot of people that listen to this podcast are people that are just in that beginning phase of thinking of, how am I going to do this? What does that look like? Especially on the marketing side, because we as nurses are not trained to market ourselves. So there's, am I supposed to do it this way? Am I supposed to do it that way? I think what you just basically said, is that you do it whichever way that it feels right to you, right?
Exactly. Exactly. I feel very blessed, and continuing opportunities come from the places that you don't necessarily expect either. I got a call today about a case management opportunity that, again, I see that as a potential area for this business to grow as well.
Right.
Because there are certainly those cases where the attorneys can use assistance of a nurse to make sure that the clients are staying on target, right, and that they understand the system that they're trying to deal with.
That's very interesting. Yeah. No, it is interesting. The more time I spend talking to different people, the more eye-opening it is into how many different avenues there are. We always say in nursing, there are so many opportunities. And my daughter's going to nursing school. I just had this conversation with her about, okay, if you don't want to go in the route you think you're going to go into, there's just so many different opportunities as a nurse. Now we're taking it a step further. It's like, as a legal nurse consultant, there are so many different ways that you can utilize being one, or utilize your expertise or your knowledge. And right there is just you're just sharing that. It doesn't have to be a certain way. It can be whichever way shows up for you and makes sense. Right. Yeah. You just have to be open to it and ready to say, how does this work? How would this work in my life versus, oh no, this is not what we do. I mean, you're still using your knowledge. You're still using your skills. I love that. I love the fact that you share that. Okay. So you've taken this business and you've made it your own. You've built your relationships and your reputation and your connections with these attorneys. And now you're experiencing this growth. And I know that I see you on social media a lot, and you have opportunities for other nurses that obviously you can't be at every DME because you've got this list, right? So you have taken on this role of mentorship in the DME space. And tell me a little bit about that. Did you kind of know that you were going to have to, educate these nurses? Is that, I know that because that's how you were kind of taken under somebody else's wing, and so you knew you were going to take on that role. Were you excited about that? Was that something that you?
I was, and I think that I understood the struggle, because when you are new to this, you do have to find people that are willing to teach you and to share share information with you. And honestly, when I first got involved with the training end of things, it was kind of a self-preservation thing, to be honest with you, because I was training so many new people. And, it's interesting with defense medical exams, they tend to never be quite the same, because the players are different, the attorneys are different, the examiners are different, and the clients and their injuries are different. So, you wind up with, situation where you're dealing with different types of things. So when I would talk to people, and again, all the nurses have come from different clinical backgrounds, right? So I would be dealing with nurses that might come from OB or from the OR. Interestingly enough, those are two of my favorite nurses to work with, because they are used to collaborating with physicians, and so that helps in these defense medical exams, where they're not gonna shrink away from saying something that they know the physician may not want to hear, I guess is a good way to put it.
I totally understand that. That's a very interesting perspective, and it makes sense. They are definitely used to having that confidence to have a conversation and collaboration with a physician. Yeah, that makes complete sense. So now that you've got this well-oiled machine, I'm sure, do you have a structure? Do you have like a routine? Is everything really routine for you?
It's gotten better. It's gotten pretty organized. I've developed spreadsheets and ways to automate the process so that it saves all of us time. It's easier for the firms because they can go in and make the request online instead of having to email back and forth, which can be very time consuming because you don't get the information that you need all the time. Whereas if they're filling out a form, then they are giving you everything you need.
That's a very good point. Yeah. So you're not missing anything. Yeah.
Exactly. So I've found that to be helpful. And then I think, coordinating the training so that it's on a webinar and it's something that the nurses can do. And not only that, we tried, in the educational program that we did, we tried to give them enough information that they could to assist them in thinking critically because the situations always change, as I already said earlier. So this gives them some scenarios, some things to think about, and hopefully makes it less stressful. A lot of people say anybody can go to a DME and observe, and that may be true, but not everybody should be doing it because it does really take a special set of skills, in order to do it effectively.
Right.
And I hope that, one of the things I would like to see is how can we get better at this? What is it that an observer can learn? What can they add to their repertoire so that they are really seeing everything that they should be seeing and being as effective as they can possibly be?
Yeah. No, I can imagine that that there's so much room for making it better. Like now, I think, obviously attorneys know and understand a nurse being there. That's the first level, right? Now we know, yes, we need a nurse. Yeah. But it's really taking it to the next level. How do we make this piece of the legal nurse consulting puzzle even better? I love that. I think that that's great. And I know that you are taking that on. There are a handful of people that do. I know Tim Kane also is a DME.
Yes.
We had a conversation about DMEs as well, and the fact that that's your wheelhouse, and really just making that better only helps the rest of the community who can help. Either they have their own practice and you just happen to have a DME that's in their neighborhood and they can be of assistance, but they don't necessarily need to be just a nurse. Like they can, come to the table with something more valuable. I think it only helps the entire community with those handful that are really trying to make it better. I love that.
Exactly.
I really love that. I think that that's what this is all about. The podcast, it's just this community is really, I don't want to say surprised me, but I say this all the time. It's like, it's just something I didn't expect was how supportive the community is in helping to make the community better. That it's not a competition, that it's not me against you and my list of attorneys versus your list of attorneys. It's you taking on the fact that you want DME observers to be better. It just gives all of us extra tools in our toolbox to come to the table with someone that says, hey, we've heard that nurses go to these. Can you tell me more about that? Well, yes, I can, because Terri has told me how amazing it can be, and this is what I need to look for, and this is what
Mm-hmm.
So I love that you're taking that on. It's only helping us.
Thank you. I'm pretty excited about it. And I didn't share this with you yet, but I was actually at a conference in New Orleans last week, and we're trying to tap away to let attorneys know that we are LNCs and we are available in this area, right, and this is what we can bring to the table. It's interesting because the law with regard to DMEs in Louisiana allows an observer, but the judges have been resistant to the attorneys' interactions regarding, how these things are going to be managed. So it was pretty exciting to talk to some of the attorneys in New Orleans and begin to see the little wheels turning and them thinking, oh, wow, I could use this and how could I use it? So, I'm crossing my fingers that we made some good contacts and actually had 2 nurses from California flying in to help me with that.
Yeah. So. Wow. That's great. Yeah. You're kind of scratching the surface of something that can be, just so, there's so many attorneys, I'm sure that need to hear that. So then that leads me, I have 2 questions. I'm sure I have more, but I have 2 questions. One, your attorney clients. Now, I know that you have attorney clients that are in need of observers in California. What does that look like to you? Is it across the whole U.S.? Is that what your list looks like? Like you have opportunities for nurses to work with you all over the U.S.?
I'm growing that list right now because the cases that I do are California based. And the civil code in California requires that the exam be within 75 miles of the client's home. So for those people that come from out of state that are visiting California or were living in California at the time and then moved somewhere else, we do find that we wind up having needs around the country. This past year, I think I trained or utilized 10 out-of-state nurses. Right. So, close to 1 a month that we were having from outside of the state of California. Right. I don't know how things are going to develop in Louisiana, but I have been excited to talk to some of the local nurses, local LNCs that are interested in, in learning more about it.
Right. So that when they are ready to utilize it in the way that works for the state, then you're ready to go.
Ready to go.
Your team. I love it. Like polished and ready to go. Okay. So then the second question is, let's say a legal nurse in California runs into an attorney who has never used a nurse in a nurse observer, and they don't understand the value. What would you tell that nurse to say in this grocery line conversation about the value of a legal nurse in an observation, in a DME observation role?
Yeah, we kind of did this in New Orleans, because you've only got minutes to kind of, pull them in and get their attention for a few minutes. But we talked about it and said, hey, have you considered having a nurse at your DMEs? And they were like, well, why would I want to do that? Well, the nurse is really the client's calm in the storm, right? They're there. Nurses tend to have a quieting, calming effect, and these clients have been traumatized already, and are stressed going into this. Sure. And what we keep the examiners honest. And what do I mean by that? Well, I can tell you that I can count a lot of times when I went into exams and the client would be complaining of, for example, numbness in the lower extremity, and there would not even be an evaluation of sensation. So, we talk about how not only are we giving you a report that documents what we see, how the client responds,
Right.
What is going on with the examiner, but we also tell you what we're used to seeing that we didn't see, which to me can be very interesting information. We also provide a chronological time. So I have one attorney that works with me regularly that's like, keep those times coming. He says, I just love when I can look at your report and I can say, your doc was in the room with my client for 6 minutes.
Right.
So these are all things that are, a potential interest to the attorney.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes complete sense. And, it's, yes, the nurses are compassionate. I think it's a very easy sell for, for the attorney and the client, but so essentially it was what we called, your elevator pitch. What would your elevator pitch be?
Exactly.
If you run into an attorney, that's really helpful. And I'm sure that you will get plenty of messages now asking you that question, or maybe they have had that conversation, or maybe they are in the middle of talking to an attorney and really don't know what to say. So that's really helpful. So thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. Okay. So now, do you do other work besides for the DME work, or do you do behind the scenes? Do you do any other legal nurse consulting work?
Yes, we do some chronologies. And as I mentioned, case management. I think case management and personal injury is really a woefully underutilized service that we can offer.
Right.
And it isn't for every case, but there are many cases that will wind up settling for very large sums of money. So the case would support utilizing a nurse. And even for some of the lesser cases, one of the things as a DME nurse that used to set my teeth on edge would be to go into the exam and hear the client say they were having 8 out of 10 pain somewhere. And when asked what they were doing about it or when they were seeing the doctor again, they basically said nothing,
Right.
So these are, and I think that sometimes the attorneys don't realize that we could help keep the clients on track with those needs.
Yeah.
We understand that, okay, yes, this is a 35-year-old mother with 3 kids. No, she's not getting to her physical therapy. Let's talk with her about that and understand what we can do to facilitate that, because if they are first off, the care, them receiving the appropriate care is best for them on their health continuum, and it's best for their case if they are
compliant.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so would you say, I think this is fascinating because this is the first I've really heard of utilizing a nurse, but it makes complete sense. What kind of nurse would make a great case management nurse if you haven't done case management before? So if you are a nurse, you're like, oh, wow, that sounds interesting. What do you think you need? What kind of skills do you think you need to be that person for something?
I know that a lot of people don't, it seems like we're relaxing the bar a little bit for how much experience we think nurses need to have in order to do this. I have a personal opinion. I like my nurses to have 10 years of experience, to be honest with you. That's what I like to see. I have hired nurses that have less and have been satisfied, but I've invested in that, right? So I think, we need to use caution with that for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely I would like to see somebody with some varied experience, right? Particularly for case management, I like ER nurses. I like ICU nurses. Again, we talked a little bit about the labor and delivery nurses, and the OR nurses are very good about communication, very effective communication.
Right.
But I would say if I had to pick somebody, skill background, I'm looking for probably ER and ICU nurses who are, who are capable in those areas.
No, that's really helpful because you just never know if something may spark someone that's listening to this who's like, I just don't know which direction to. Something like that. We were just talking about it earlier. You just never know the opportunity. And maybe because of what you just said, you may have just created a new case management, nurse that can that would take this and embrace it and run with it. So I love that.
And I think the only thing they need to do is just remember that it's not typical hospital case management.
Right.
That it's medical legal case management.
Right.
And we also refer to it as advocacy, so that you're building that relationship with the client. You're assessing what they need. You're explaining to the attorney so that everybody's clear on what's needed and and what can potentially be done. So it's a lot of communicating, but I think it's a great opportunity, and again, underutilized at this point in time.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. I actually, the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of this is the term navigator. There's a nurse navigator for things now. That seems to be in the last, I don't know how many years, this term that comes up, being a nurse navigator. It's kind of this visual too. You're navigating someone through. I don't know if it relates to case management. You're managing their care, but I still see that as kind of the same thing. You're navigating their client through the process as a nurse. So
yes,
maybe we just created a new buzzword.
Yeah. I love it.
Okay. Do you have any other advice for? I love the fact that you said that the 10 years thing, and maybe that comes from being a nurse for longer than most people. Because I come from the same cloth where being around nursing for a very long time, you've seen a lot of things that new nurses don't see.
Exactly.
So I can appreciate that for sure. And I understand what you're saying, how we've set it. I think it kind of goes along with the same lines of young nurses, new nurses becoming nurse practitioners very quickly. Yes.
Yeah.
Same conversation. It's definitely the same conversation. We love you guys. You just see more. You've been through the process. And when you get to that nursing age, you'll say the same thing.
Yeah. Agreed.
Right. Well, I appreciate you sharing all of this information and your journey. And I've loved getting to know you even more now. Can you share with everyone where they can find you? And again, I'm sure that you're going to get messages interested in more information and how can I help and how can I, do you need more help? I'm sure you'll get lots of messages. How would they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, and then my email address is my name, which is Terri, Terri, last name Chabaud, CHAB as in boy, AUD as in dog, and then at the first initial, the last name, so tchabaud.com. And, I'm happy to hear from people. I love when they share their resumes with me. It's great to keep track of people who would potentially be willing to train to do exams in other states. So I hope people do reach out if they have questions. And another thing real quick that I'd love to invite those people that would like to offer this as a service but have never done the job themselves. consider getting educated and taking some courses within, whatever opportunities there are out there,
Right.
so that you really understand, DMEs and what goes on in them. If you're going to supervise, you need to be a resource for that. So
Right.
definitely would encourage people to do that as well.
Perfect. Yes, definitely educate yourself. It's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. Okay. Well, thank you so much again for your time. I'm glad we got a chance to sit down and chat, and I'm sure we'll continue to chat. So I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I appreciate you.
Thank you for joining us in this fun conversation on the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I hope you found this episode as inspiring and empowering as I always do. And I hope that you share this episode with your friends. If you enjoyed it, I would love it if you could leave us a review or comment, as I would love to share them in the future episodes. Or hop on over into my DMs and send me a quick message. I can be found on Instagram at anna.b.gray, on my website at limitlesslnc.com, and over on LinkedIn at anna.gray. And I want you to remember, you are limitless. Until next time.